Okay. So actually, let me jump over here. Sorry. So my name is Alex. I work at a company called Trusted Sec. You may have heard of us. We work with companies in all sizes, all verticals, everything else. I always joke that there was a couple years ago where I worked with a sole proprietorship where one guy writes the code, takes out the trash, sells the code, et cetera. Then next week working with the Fortune 5. So you really do just kind of see the gamut. I would say that I'm definitely not smarter than anybody else, but I've seen so many different environments, kind of see what works and what doesn't, and that's one of the ways we're able to provide some value. And then my good friend Dale, who's also one of our partners.
I work for an accounting firm, Maloney Novotny. Same sort of thing. I see a lot of different industries. I'm a former practitioner turned to accountant. So I used to be in IT, but now I'm actually an accountant. So I see it from two sides. I see it from the money side as well as the technical side.
And a little bit more just about Dale too is that a lot of people talk about or ask about SOC 2s or high trust or things like that, and so that's the kind of stuff he actually does. And so somebody that I always trust, who actually kind of understands IT and security, but also does those types of audit things. So probably important to note. So today, we talked a little bit about what we want to talk about, and one of the things is you always hear. Compliance is not security. Compliance is not security. Compliance is not security, right? Everybody's heard that, right? But in the end, and the more we think about it, if you look at a lot of organizations, why do they even do security? One of the biggest drivers that you run into is compliance. And and that's whether, we'll get into a little bit, whether that's like contractual compliance or vendor compliance or regulatory or whatever else it might be. So as much as you want to beat up on compliance, it's extremely important, and if used properly, it can be an incredible way to implement a security program or get buy-in.
Yep, the last question, how do you get management's buy-in? Compliance is the way to do it. Like you mentioned, the SOC 1s and the SOC 2s, they're a little bit different type of compliance because, believe it or not, you actually get to come up with your own controls. A lot of it is done through interview. I would salivate to get somebody like you on a SOC 1 or a SOC 2. I could write forever the controls that you have in place. And you want to know the great thing about a SOC 1 and a SOC 2? That's used by sales and goes to every potential customer or customer that you have. You can tie what you do directly to the money. So you want to get management's buy-in, that's a great way to do it. Most of the time, like I said, I'm a former practitioner. I know how I'm sort of viewed in a room of practitioners. But I can be your best friend. I should be your best friend. You should be willing to talk. You should be willing to explain. Using that, you can leverage that into getting the fun toys like Splunk, all those nice little stickers that you had on the back of your laptop. You can use that relationship to build your security program.
And real quick, one housekeeping item, because I know this is being videotaped, probably for the internet, right? So if you're the person that called from LA and is looking for a sample of one of my presentations, this is not the one to use. This is an informal meeting. So keep searching and find one with a suit. Then we're good to go. All right. So.
But
important, right?
And the whole point of that definition of information security is compliance is the demonstration of what you guys actually do to practice information security. That was sort of what the definition was up there for.
So it's really interesting because, again, one of the things we talk about, like what's one of the most misunderstood words in our industry is governance, right? So what is governance? And people always have trouble defining it. And one of the things that I think it's easiest to remember is if you look at companies that do security well, if they don't, in the absence of compliance drivers, it oftentimes is they just got lucky, right? They hired a woman or they hired a man who just happens to be very interested in security, they know what to do, and they got lucky. And a lot of companies just don't have that. And so when you look outside of that, being able to, pull the compliance into the governance program is extremely important. The other things that you see all the time, how many times if you're in consulting or if you're internal, how many times do executives come to you and say, hey, I was watching CNN or I was watching Fox or whatever people watch, and I saw this story about this one vulnerability or whatever it is, or somebody got hacked, and that's what drives it, right? And then if you're lucky, strategic direction, right? But how often do you see that? Less often? Yeah, you have a question? You completely raised your hand. So that's like this, that's awkward. All right.
Common compliance scenarios. How many of you actually answer the questionnaires? How many of you get the questionnaires from your customers or from potential customers and answer them? That's actually compliance. You're actually helping with the compliance. And again, it's something that allows you to directly tie what you're doing to the bottom line. Couple tidbits of information on the vendor questionnaires though. Only answer as much as you need to. Don't be as chatty that you give them more fodder than they actually need to answer what they do. And again, it's the demonstration versus the protection. It's the demonstration of what you're actually doing to protect your network. Use those questionnaires to further your own agendas. Because it's one of those things that everyone has to do.
So audit tip. So obviously one of my close friends is an IT auditor. I'm also engaged to an IT auditor, which I always like to point that out during presentations, because I was giving a presentation, and then afterwards she kept talking to me, and I put my arm around her, and I was like, oh, I don't really think I'm creepy. I was like, we're actually, right, like we're in a committed, loving relationship. So just FYI, I'm not just randomly. So it's important to know, right? I thought about that. But obviously with any audit, just making sure that we're thorough, we're complete, we're honest, but you just answer the question. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. You give the least amount of information to actually answer the question.
It's interesting, I think, oftentimes also the relationship between internal audit and IT, etc. One of my favorite stories in consulting is sometimes you get credit for doing or saying things that seem pretty obvious. And I remember going out to a client, it's lower in the 500, but in the Fortune 500, and I walked in and they were super excited to see me, and it's not because I'm fun, but they had the audit findings, and they're like, Alex, can you help us decipher these audit findings? I'm like, well, let me see them. And so they're showing me this stuff, and I'm like, well, where does audit sit? They're like, oh, they're on floor 2. And I'm like, why don't we just go up and ask them, right? And that's what we did, and ended up having lunch, and actually kind of that so often that they got me an employee badge so I could get the discounted salad bar. But that also stunk because then I couldn't park in visitor parking anymore, and it was like, but anyway. But the point being is communication is obviously super important.
Yeah, it should be a conversation. That's what most of us miss most of the time. Is it should be the beginning of a conversation. It's not an I got you or it should be the beginning of a conversation.
So 2 things, malicious compliance, hear that expression, right? So there are 2 definitions that I hear. One is, being compliant just to be compliant. So we know that this is terrible, it doesn't help anything, we're going to do it, we got our check mark, we're good to go. Any PCI fans? Any PCI hobbyists? PCI hobbyists? Right, yeah. I'm a QSA, right? It's important to know, it's whatever it is. But I would say I don't want to hear your opinion on PCI unless you've also taken the rigorous day-long class, so an open book test. But one of the things is so there's that, and then there's obviously using compliance to kind of be a jerk. So you're not doing things right, so we're going to use this to have a cudgel to come after you, etc. Meeting the spirit. Did anybody drive here? Not. I looked at Zillow, and the walkability score here is like really low, so I'm assuming we all drove. But it's something that if you think about it, you drive out here on the highway, and it's 70 miles an hour. Right, I'm in compliance. Now this Saturday, when we're getting 6 to 8 inches of snow, I can be in compliance going 68, but I'm probably not safe or secure. Am I right? All right. But the reason I brought up PCI is back in the old days, it used to say what? It said you had to have an application security firewall, right? But what else did it say? Nothing. It could just be sitting there, any, as long as it was there, right? So if you had it and it was sitting there, any, you're good, right? You're compliant. Are you secure? I don't know.
Most frameworks can't keep up with the how fast technology actually changes too. So they're a great tool, but they're not a cover-all, as he makes the point.
Do they cover everything?
Absolutely not.
There you go. Anyway, talking about budgets.
Yeah. Again, I've said it twice now. I'm going to say it a third time too. It's a great way to get your budget. Again, it's something you can tie directly to the bottom line, especially if your company is selling something. Because I guarantee you, 9 times out of 10, when somebody brings me in for a SOC audit, it's not because they actually wanted to do it, like that strategic direction he was talking about before. It's because somebody is going to become a customer and said, hey, you don't have this, and we want you to have it. Again, that's directly tied to sales. You can show exactly what you're doing is bringing in money to the company. And I guarantee you, every salesperson, their first stop is to IT or to security to make sure that they have what the customer is asking for. So again, use that to your advantage. I know most of the time it's seen as a necessary evil, but you might as well use the necessary evil to get the fun toys that you actually want to play with.
So I spent, it took me 9 years to get through college, and I should be a doctor, but I barely have a bachelor's. But the point being is I took HR classes, and one of the things that really stuck with me was, one of the professors saying that removing a demotivator is not a motivator. So removing something that makes you insecure doesn't make you secure, right? So getting to a baseline or a tear does not make you secure automatically. It's just bringing you up to a general level. The example in HR was always like a dirty bathroom. So if you give your employees a dirty bathroom, it's a demotivator. Cleaning the bathroom is not a motivator. It's just how things ought to be, right? So it's getting you up to a baseline, not making you better.
Compliance-based versus risk-based. As we said before, not every compliance framework has every checkbox that you'll need to check. So it's good to take a look at what you're actually doing to make sure that it's covering the basis that you need it to.
Yep, and again, one of the things that we're always pushing is risk-based security. Because again, everybody has 500 things you ought to do, right? You ever see a standard, right? You look at, a lot of these, and some of the things are just there to be there. But really looking at, what's actually important, what your actual risks are. If you look at the risk equation, I could talk for a long time about risk. I won't do that to you. But, if you look at probability, impact, those are two things that I think in our industry we oftentimes miss. We think a lot about the really high impact stuff, even though it's incredibly low probability. I think about, I fly all the time. Sorry, honey, but I'll be home more this year. But, you always, I'm happy to drive to the airport, right? I go 90 miles an hour down 480, not a care in the world, right? Then I get in the plane, and I'm always terrified. As that plane rotates, I don't care how much I fly, I'm always nervous. And statistically, there's almost no chance that plane's gonna crash. Although now I'm flying next week, and I'm with the TSA, who knows what's slipping through there. But
just don't go through Atlanta.
No, I'm thinking about driving. It's Boston though, 11 hours. But one of the things is just thinking about that from a risk-based perspective, right? You can be compliant, whatever, but what are your actual risks?
Again, most of the time it's a checkbox mentality. You do the minimum that you actually need to meet the compliance. You're just making the checkbox. You have the web application firewall or the application firewall that has the any rule. You have the firewall. Are you compliant? Yes. Are you actually doing anything? No.
But if you've done a proper risk assessment, maybe just being compliant is enough, right? Might not make you secure, but it might be enough. The other thing is obviously using compliance to drive your security program. It can be very tough, to get budget or buy-in or whatever expression we want to use. But oftentimes compliance is a great driver. So hey, we want to do this, we want to do that. It's going to make us compliant. It becomes a bottom line issue. I would say that executives oftentimes care about different zeros and ones than we do. So we care about the zeros and ones of code. I mean, I don't as much. I do GRC, let's be honest. But and executives tend to care more about the zeros and ones of dollars. And compliance is oftentimes a very good way to communicate that and get internal budgets.
Yeah, and you always say defense in depth. Just like the previous presentation, there were all those layers that you layered on to catch the people before they're actually doing anything. Use compliance as another one of those layers. It's one you're not going to be able to actually get rid of, so you might as well use it to your advantage.
That last bullet point is yours. I don't remember why we put it there.
Integration into sales. Like I said, most of the time I've seen people be as successful with compliance is they actually integrate it into their sales. The first thing they actually lead with are all of the check boxes that you have checks, all of the things that you can present to your potential customers, to your customers, to show that you are doing what you're doing.
So what is our actual responsibility in our industry? And this is something I think about all the time. I don't know, I mean, occasionally I'll get up in the morning and I'm like, why do we do this anymore? Everything's gonna be breached. We're not gonna have jobs because all the data will have been breached and there'll be nothing to protect anymore, right? But, but if you look at what our actual responsibilities are in the profession, there's a lot of regulatory requirements, contractual, we want to be able to do business, financial availability is what we oftentimes forget, reputation. If you're familiar with, I'm a really big fan of Jack Jones, and, listening to him talk about, it's less about reputational risk, because risk is so complicated, especially to quantify, but it's more reputational damage. But the big one to me is kind of the duty to protect information. And, you start thinking about, I was thinking about my dad. My dad's a smart guy, but I don't want somebody stealing my dad's stuff, online because he's trying to read some story, and so it really does come down to that, even outside of just compliance or contractual obligations, I think that we have an inherent responsibility and duty to help other people and help them protect their data. One final point, it might seem a little bit disjointed, but the other thing I always think about too is types of data. So if you lost your credit card today, do you really care? if your credit card gets stolen? I mean, as a QSA, of course I do, right? But in general, what happens? You know, I canceled my credit card basically because it was a recurring payment. I didn't want to call. But you press a button, and you know what? The next day it shows up. They FedEx it. You're done. There's not really any liability. But what if you lost your browsing history? Or what if you lost, your texting history? Or what if you, lost all your company secrets and that kind of thing? And so getting into just thinking about those different types of data that we have and we deal with, I think is important.
If you've seen those things now, I don't know if you've seen it, it's the, if you have like a medical condition, if you're like knocked out, you can't communicate to them that you have an allergic to sulfide antibiotics or something like that. They actually have one now that says delete my browsing history. So if you're ever in trouble and you need somebody to go delete your browsing history, you can do that.
It doesn't delete automatically when you close your browser?
No.
So, Dale, what's coming? What do you think?
More of the same. We're only going to get more. The second point, cybersecurity insurance is probably going to do the most for audit, my industry, than anything else has done before. Cybersecurity insurance is just becoming more popular. You're already seeing in the news that they're starting to refuse to be able to refuse people to pay out on the claims that they have made. What that's going to do is it's going to drive them to force you to prove to them that they're actually able to cover you. So like I said, you're going to start seeing a lot more audits come your way because a lot of companies are starting to really take a hold of cybersecurity insurance. Same with a lot of the frameworks that you see, GDPR, California Consumer Privacy Act, the Ohio Safe Harbor Act, which I'm not sure if you've seen, but it can protect you from some tort liability for breaches that you have here in Ohio if you're compliant with some of these frameworks. I'm surprised that there was no audit clause in that because there's no real good way to show that you are compliant with those frameworks to protect yourself from those torts. But as those things evolve, more and more states are going to start coming out with those things, including Ohio. I guarantee you'll see that that's amended at some point to add some teeth to it to make sure that you're actually being audited to be able to be protected by that law. You're just going to see it more and more.
And we could talk about cyber insurance forever. One of the things that's interesting, and again, I know it's a little bit off topic, but just I actually had a conversation today with somebody. It was Justin, and somebody I've known for 10 years, and it was literally the first time I knew something he didn't, which is interesting. But just about how cyber insurance is really kind of changing, in that it used to feel a lot more like life insurance, where there was a defined payout for an event. And now it feels a lot more like medical insurance, where they provide certain services. So you've heard of Breach Coach, so you can do a Breach Coach, or they have certain IR forensic services, etc. It's also funny the earlier presentation with the tweet. So I haven't actually seen Dave Kennedy speak in the past 6 months, so I had not seen that tweet, but I did watch Meet Lunch today. So there's that. So.
No, but take credit for what you guys do. You guys work hard. You guys are the ones that protect everybody's stuff. Take credit for it. When you have the ability, when you have the opportunity to enumerate on the stuff you do, take credit for it. Make sure that what you have is laid out and displayed for everyone to see.
I think we're doing pretty well there, Pepperidge version. Actually impressed with us. So this is actually one of my favorite slides. If you've seen me present before, you've probably seen it. It's funny, so I think it's 2 years old. For years, I used to always reference that I went to OU as one of the many colleges I attended. And I remember we'd walk home at night, and there's this one guy that used to live in the next dorm over, and you see him sometimes, and he'd kind of just try every door handle on these parallel park cars. And I'd never figure out what he was doing. And what it turns out was, if the doors were unlocked, he'd take the change of the sunglasses or whatever it was. If the doors were locked, he didn't care. He just moved on. He didn't care. And so then this pops up. I live in Sugar Falls, the next town over, so it's perfect for presentations. I'm I don't know who this criminal is. You're terrible. I hope you get caught, but thank you for the slide. But it's a really good example. If you look at this, that people are going after these unlocked cars. And if the door's locked, they just move on. And so that's a really good, I think, kind of analogy for a lot of what's in the security business. So what compliance does, does it make you fully secure? No, but oftentimes does it knock back a lot of this stuff? It puts in some things at least, so you can get rid of this and focus more on the determined attackers or other things? I think so.
Absolutely. It gives you a starting point too.
Yep.
Half the time the hardest thing to do is to actually start, so it gives you a good starting point.
The other point I always like to say about compliance is that as much as it oftentimes gets beaten up, I've seen a lot of companies in my day, and really if every company followed, just pick one, like PCI, they followed the spirit of PCI, did a lot of stuff with PCI, we'd probably be more secure as a world overall. So as much as we like to kid about some of these things, I think that they do a lot of good.
Yeah, like you said, it's all about communication. It's all about starting the conversation.
And along the same vein, so this is like an older article from The Onion. I don't know. I think it's satirical, but I'm not sure. But it's a joke. There's I covered this. We reused the template, and I covered it up because the presentation I was giving, I didn't know wherever it was from, and it would be offensive. But it's from a country, right? So some country unable to recruit hackers fast enough to keep up with vulnerabilities in U.S. security systems. And as much as it's a joke, a lot of ways it does feel true. So who's got questions? There'll be some kind of question. Usually I plant questions in the audience, but I didn't get around to it. The Pittsburgh is one of my better things. Yeah?
I'm not your plan, but let's take PCI. So all these major credit card breaches over the years.
Yep.
The companies say they're PCI compliant, but clearly they miss things.
Well, so a couple things, and because it's recorded, I'll measure what I say, but PCI is interesting, and there's a lot of different views on it, and I think that one thing, if you look at it, you probably could think about it as something that it's a hedge against regulation. So hey, we try to police ourselves. We can try to hopefully keep regulations from coming. Another issue I have, and I'm getting to your point, is I'm a QSA, and if I come out and I assess you, and you don't like what I found, if you don't like the fact that I found you non-compliant, if you don't like the fact that you had findings, what's your option? You get another QSA. Boom, that's it. And there's a whole range, and there are QSAs that'll come out and follow the standard, and they'll be there for a while. I'll work with organizations where they were talking about their PCI audit process, and they'll say, oh, our QSA was here for 2 hours. You're talking about, a retailer with billions of dollars in sales. So a lot of it's what you make of it. PCI is also a point in time. So very clearly, because you could be compliant today, and then by the time of the breach you're non-compliant. The other thing is you use sampling. It's not completely prescriptive as far as sampling sizes, but it does address it a bit. With sampling, it's always possible to miss. But that's a tough one, because I don't know if it's true, so don't quote me on it, but I know at one time it was that no breached organization had ever been found to have actually been compliant, right? I don't know if that's still true, but that was what was bandied about. So you could certainly, think about that. Did that answer your question at all?
A little bit.
Well, then tell me how to ask it more specifically.
No, I just PCI is just one example, but I feel like all the time and effort that really InfoSec organizations usually own that technical part of compliance programs.
Right.
The time that takes away just to check the box, to your point, knowing that they could go above and beyond, but most can't because they don't get budget to do.
Well, but again, and if you look at a lot of it's to get good enough, and as a liability hedge, and this is just me speaking as someone that reads news articles, not as someone with any kind of inside knowledge. But I would say that if you look at the credit card industry, and you're taking some percent, some cents of every single transaction, right? If you're Walmart, it's probably lower. If you're a small retailer, it's bigger. But anywhere from 18 to 27 cents of every single transaction made with a credit card, plus you're getting a percent of the entire purchase, plus you're getting all that interest on the back end, right? So what do you want to happen? You want those transactions to happen. And so you could secure credit cards and the system's much better, right? But then you would lower use. And so obviously it becomes a risk-based decision, as we discussed. And you start to think about it, if you had to enter a PIN and use your fingerprint every time you swiped, what are you gonna do? I just use cash, right? So it's always a balancing act, and I think that really is a good example of kind of getting a balance between what's secure and what allows commerce to be conducted, and then finding a middle ground that works from a business perspective. You can go even further and start talking about the liability and how it switches and how it moves around, because that's really what PCI is a liability flow. But now, did that answer your question? Am I getting closer? All right, because I could talk for another half hour if you want. All right. Any other questions? So 2 quick plugs. So February 20th, something, is it 28th? So there's a joint ISACA Federal Reserve meeting at the Federal Reserve. If you want to go to that, somebody that I know was speaking for an hour and a half because one of the speakers backed out, so now I'm speaking for an hour and a half. So you can come to that. And then February 11th, please make sure that you're watching Channel 5 at 11 p.m. And I'm not going to say what it's about, but it's very topical for February 14th if you're searching for love online. So we'll have a cool story coming out of that.
Channel 5.
Is that what I said?
ABC.
Is that ABC? I know it's Newsnet 5, which is, I don't know, it was, yeah, so I'm really looking forward to that. It's gonna be interesting. So. That's it. Wrapping it up. Well, thank you all very much. We appreciate it.